Where Hollywood hides, here's Bob and Suzanne.
Chicken joke!
I'm Mrs. Cleaver.
From Television City in Hollywood.
Boy, the way Glenn Miller plays.
I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
We're on a mission from God.
Run, Forrest, run!
We can rebuild him. We have the technology.
You had me at hello.
Nano.
Baby, you're the great.
I'm not going to be ignored.
Here comes the judge.
Go ahead. Make my day.
I got nowhere else to go!
Small cowbell.
That fashion.
There's anything wrong with that. You can't handle the truth.
I'm not an actor, I'm a movie star! That's the story of my life. No respect. I don't get no respect at all. I'm the dude.
I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
And now for something completely different.
There's no business like show business, like no business I know.
Welcome to Where Hollywood Hides. This is podcast episode number 43. My name is Bob McCullough.
And my name is Suzanne Herrera-McCullough.
What's so funny?
I'll tell you what's so funny.
What?
We generally do these podcasts in the late mornings because we are fresh and happy.
You're always fresh and happy.
But one of these days I'd like to do a podcast after a couple glasses of wine in the evening.
Okay.
Would that be a hoot?
It would.
You know how we get in the evenings.
We could always have, tequila sunrise for breakfast.
That's right. We just have to pick the right guest.
Hey, listen, I've really been looking forward to today's interview. Kind of a special person for me. But before we get started, I want to remind everybody to go to our website at wherehollywoodhides.com, where you'll find a lot of Amazon links to all the products, DVDs, books.
Like our books?
Like our books.
Where Hollywood Hides Santa Barbara, Celebrities in Paradise.
You're talking about our hardcover full-color book?
I am.
That has had spectacular reception on Amazon.com.
I am.
The one that they can go to our website at wherehollywoodhides.com and get free shipping.
I am.
That's the book you're talking about?
That's the book.
You know, that book makes a great gift for Father's Day.
Graduation.
My birthday's coming up. You could buy me one. I
might even give this away at a wedding. Would that be inappropriate?
I don't think so. It's a great souvenir.
Oh.
It's
I don't know.
Not only is it packed with celebrity pictures and great professional biographies, but there's a lot of history in there that really explains the origins of the film business in California predating Hollywood.
I guess they could put it on their coffee table.
Because
on their new coffee table that somebody bought them for their wedding.
Through Amazon links on our website.
Absolutely.
See, it all comes full circle.
It does. It does.
Right.
So this weekend I was thinking that we could go to the park, Bob.
The park?
I turn on the television and they just keep talking about the park is here.
Well, the park is open.
As in Jurassic World.
Oh, my God.
Yes, the park is open.
Jurassic Park. Are you going to...
What a publicity machine behind this movie. They claim that it could break $125 million at the box office.
It just opened.
But this is their prediction. They claim that it could surpass the opening of 50 Shades, which, by the way, I have not seen yet.
We never saw.
I think you might be intimidated.
I'm sure I would be.
Anyway, the big thing is the director. His name is Colin Trevorrow. He's only 38 years old. Apparently, he made his first big debut at the Sundance Film Festival 2012. But speaking of directors, we have a fabulous director, writer,
producer, network executive. He's done it all. Michael Zinberg is an old friend of mine. He and I were actually college roommates. And
you two must have been a real pair.
We were a real pair. Today, Michael is known primarily as a director, but he's been a writer and producer of primetime television dramas, comedies, and movies. Not everybody can do all three.
His resume is quite impressive.
His resume is incredible. He has, I didn't even count, but I'm sure there are well over 200 directing credits, and he's still working. He's got a long list of major hit shows to his credit, including Mary Tyler Moore, The Bob Newhart Show, WKRP in Cincinnati, Family Ties, Taxi,
Taxi, that was a good one.
The Yellow Rose, Everybody Loves Raymond. Then dramas like Midnight Caller, Rizzoli and Isles, and all the NCIS New Orleans shows, which he's currently involved in. Michael has also been a 4-time Emmy nominee. He's been nominated for an Emmy 4 times. He received the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Caucus of Writers, Producers, and Directors in Hollywood. He is a 40-year member of the Directors Guild and has done a lot of volunteer service with the Directors Guild, serving on its board. He's a lifetime member of the Writers Guild of America, and he's a close friend of mine.
And the list goes on.
The list goes. I could do 25 minutes just on his resume. I'm going to let him tell the story.
All I have to say is he must be extremely patient. I'm going to ask him. Patient with so many people that he works with.
I think he puts on a director's hat, and it just comes out of him. He's so well respected by producers, writers, and actors, which is not always an easy thing to achieve.
Right, that's true.
And he shot some amazing film. I recommend anybody watching television today, look at those director credits, see how many times the name Michael Zinberg comes up.
So let's go to Michael.
Michael Zinberg, the man, the myth, the legend. Thank you so much.
The man, the myth.
That has a nice ring to it, don't you think?
Well, you know,
that's good.
This is an interview we've been waiting to do for, well, over a year because, well, you and I are very close friends. I feel like I'm imposing on you a little bit, but a guy with your track record, you are making history every day you walk on a set just because you're still walking onto sets.
Because I'm still upright?
Yeah, exactly. You're vertical. And our audience is going to be fascinated to hear how somebody from San Antonio, Texas, winds up with 4 Emmy nominations, years of service with the Directors Guild, a lifetime member of the Writers Guild. I could go on, but I've already laid in your complete bio, so the audience is well aware of your track record. But what we really want to find out is...
Don't forget the Directors Guild Award, which is actually the only one I ever wanted and the only one I'm really proud of.
Well, that's amazing.
Well, that's a
wonderful.
pretty big deal.
And that was for Quantum Leap, wasn't it?
Quantum Leap.
Great show. Terrific show.
It really was.
And that was and as I recall, that was for a multi-parter, which is more complex than most shows.
It was a 3-parter.
Yeah, that's like shooting a real movie. Absolutely.
It was very interesting. It was written by Don Belisario. Very, very good script. It was the season ending episode of one year and the season opening episodes of the following year.
So listen, tell us, let's go into the Wayback Machine, Mr. Sherman's Wayback Machine.
Right.
How did you were born in San Antonio, Texas?
San Antonio, Texas.
Tell us about that. Was your family in show business?
Yeah, my family. No, my family. The closest my family got to show business was that my father sold television sets in his furniture store, which was really my downfall as an academic.
Uh-huh.
Because he was always bringing new television sets home, and we had the first color set on the block. I mean, oddly enough, or maybe not so, I was really captivated by it. I loved it as a vehicle for storytelling and entertainment and escape. And even in those days, San Antonio was barely a 3-channel universe. It was 2 channels and a kind of a ABC affiliate that went on from time to time. But, you could watch everything from Rudy Gazzuti to Captain Marvel. You could watch Naked City and Dragnet. And you could watch the wrestling from the Wrestlathon. You could watch a lot of stuff. It was pretty interesting.
So, childhood in San Antonio, at what point in time did you say, I think I want to do something like that? I want to be involved in storytelling or in film?
Oh, it wasn't until way, way down the line. I mean, I did work in a television station at KNS in San Antonio when I was in high school. I worked after school, running camera and sweeping the floor and setting lights and doing all that because, quite frankly, I wanted to build a hot rod. Uh-huh. And my father was pretty clear about it. He said, "Well, you want to build a hot rod? Get yourself a job." Rather than work in the warehouse, in his warehouse, which was really, really hard work.
Right.
Which I had done a lot of. My mother knew the program director at KNS, so I worked there for a while, and we worked at KLRN together, and then...
Now, KLRN was the University of Texas at Austin. They had like an educational television network.
It was, but by the time you got there, it was really a pretty big deal. Mostly what we did was local shows, news, and a little thing called Austin City Limits was born about that time.
Right.
As it happened, my uncle, who you know very well, by that time had moved to California, and he was in the television business out here. So I wanted to be in the television business, and I thought, and in 1963 I came out here and visited him, and it was quite a visit. It was really interesting. I was out here for almost 3 weeks.
How old were you?
19.
pretty young.
You thought you were a lot older than you were.
Right.
Of course.
So I went back and I said, I made a deal with my mother and father that I would try and finish college, and I stayed until 1965 and came out to California again right in the middle of the Watts riots. Couldn't find work and got drafted. So I had to go back to Austin. I tried to get my 2S deferment back, but that wasn't happening. So it was a pretty interesting time. And then June of 67, they cut me loose. And when school rolled around in September, I was registered and working at KLRN and met a guy named Bob McCullough.
That was then. That's for sure.
And I knew his brother, who was inordinately talented and one of the staff directors there. A bit of a madman, but he said to me, he said, I've got a brother coming from California. I don't know what to do with him. Can you help me out? I said, sure.
And we wound up being roommates for that year.
Roommate.
Yeah.
Me and Leslie. Right.
Yep. You actually starred in my very first student film.
I was brilliant. Brilliant.
Yes, it was the beginning and end of a brilliant acting career.
Nobody died more brilliantly than I did in that film. The mandatory death in every student film.
So while you're at UT, you're finishing your academic work and getting a lot of behind the camera and production experience. At what point in time did you say, Texas has been great, but I need to get out of here and go find like a real career?
As I said, my uncle lived in Los Angeles. I really never saw myself living in Texas. I love it. It's great. People are lovely. The food is great. But in 63, UT football team was national champions. And in 64, the two teams that were vying for the national championship were Arkansas and University of Texas. And the Arkansas game, by coincidence, was in Austin that year. And ABC Sports came down to cover it. And in those days, everybody from ABC Sports showed up. Roone Arledge, Chris Schenkel, Andy Sedaris, the director. And they brought their trucks in. Security being not so much in those days, I just went over to the stadium and hung around and begged what do you need? Donuts? I'll bring you coffee. What do you need? I'll do anything. And so they absolutely took very good advantage of me. And during the game, I got to sit in the truck behind Andy Sedaris and watch he and Chuck Howard and Roone Arledge work a football game in those days. And it was, pretty cool.
Right.
I kept in touch with Sedaris as you did in those days. You wrote a letter and 4 months later you get some sort of return. So I had always planned that, and I did keep in touch with them, and they were very nice, and they said, when you finish college, let us know. Maybe we'll find a spot for you. So I had these two opportunities, my uncle in Los Angeles and these guys at ABC Sports, which had only grown in those days.
Right. As
you know, I met Leslie. We all talked it over. What are we going to do? And I just thought, well, I want to write comedy, so let's move to California. And God, I remember distinctly that.
What made you think you could write comedy? Was it the Bob and Mike show?
I'm sure that helped.
I don't know that the Bob and Mike show made me think I could write anything, but I knew we had good taste because we got thrown off the air.
Right.
For putting Lenny Bruce on.
Right.
And that.
Just to bring our listeners up to speed, Michael and I, while we're in graduate school at University of Texas, somehow convinced the campus radio station to let us have our own show, in which
that was a mistake.
In which we played every comedy album we could find, and there weren't that many around. We did a lot of Bill Cosby, a lot of Bob Newhart. There was some Shelley Berman. In those
days,
Brother
Dave Gardner.
Right. In those days, comics recorded albums, and we would play them, and then in between cuts, you and I would try to be funny. And I didn't think we were that good.
Well, it was interesting. There was a 2-hour jazz show from 7 to 9, and then we were from 9 to 10, and then there was a 2-hour folk show behind us from 10 to 11. And the head of the station was a guy named Bill Giorda, who was, I thought, as dull as a human being could possibly be and still be upright. But he just was. So to make a long story short, we got hold of the Lenny Bruce album, which was classic in those days. On the old, remember, it was a red LP.
Yep.
It was from the Fantasy label.
Now let me ask you, Mike. This was a little before my time. Lenny Bruce was pretty racy in those days, right? He isn't so racy now, but it was really taboo.
It was pretty racy stuff. It really was.
Particularly in Central Texas.
and we were going to listen to our show, and we turned on the radio, and they played a show from a previous week.
Yeah.
And we said, well, wait a minute, that's not the show.
Yeah.
That's a clue.
Yeah.
And so we showed up on Monday morning, and Mr. Jorda promptly informed us that our services were no longer required.
Right. We were canceled. So getting back to your comedy instinct, did your inspiration to write comedy come from some of that, or did that just come from having been a fan of guys like Newhart?
I always loved comics. I loved Gleason. I loved Sid Caesar. I loved all of that stuff on television. I loved the Van Dyke Show. I loved situation comedy. So, that just seemed to be something that there were a lot of guys' names on there. Somebody was making a living at it. I might as well be me.
So you had the inspiration and the determination to return to California and get into that aspect of the business. Tell us about your very first job.
My uncle had arranged a meeting with the head of CBS on the West Coast, a gentleman named Perry Lafferty. So I put on my best Brooks Brothers suit, tie, and I met Perry Lafferty. He spent a total of about 7 minutes with me, sent me down the hall to a guy named Howard Adamson, and he sent me down to a guy named Dave Osborne, and I spent about an hour with him, and he hired me on the spot. So I went to wardrobe, got myself a CBS Television City usher gray suit.
So you were not hired as a vice president of production?
I was not hired I was hired as some schlepper usher.
But that schlepper usher, there's a lot of guys that wanted that job, I'm sure.
So the lesson here is...
It's who you know again.
You need contacts, right? And B...
You definitely need contacts.
And B, if they offer you something, take it.
In a heartbeat. And I was an usher and gave tours, and I learned very quickly from the other ushers, a bunch of pretty good guys, that the tour was pretty much what you made of it.
Right.
In other words, it didn't have to be totally factual. CBS Television City was erected at a cost of $100 million on an Indian burial ground in 1902. I mean, nobody cared.
Now, in those days, because I'm not sure this still goes on, the networks, NBC, CBS, ABC, they had a staff of guest relations people, ushers, basically.
Absolutely right. That's what it's called.
Young men in blue blazers with name tags, and the public could buy a ticket and get a tour of the facilities.
That's correct.
Right.
And they were doing the Smothers Brothers show, and Johnny Winters, and Carol Burnett, and Red Skelton, and the Art Linkletter House Party.
Oh, one of my favorites. Come on.
I remember that.
Come on.
So, we had to handle the audiences and do all that stuff. And about 3 weeks later, I applied for a job in the studio operations department. And I got the job because I had worked at KLRN and I knew all that stuff. And I did that job for quite a while. I was writing spec scripts at night.
So you're at CBS in really a production services capacity.
Yeah.
Very much behind the scenes, scheduling stages and equipment and things like that.
Right.
How do you get out of that job and find something a little more creative?
Well, as I said, I was writing spec scripts. I must have written 20, 25 spec scripts.
That English major really helped.
Yeah, right. I got into a guy named Paul King who liked them.
So quickly describe for us, even then, your perception of the distinction between a production job and writing, directing, acting. What above and below the line kinds of issues were already in your mind?
Well, one is you're creating the show, and the other is you're supplying the elements to create the show. And this is not in any way demeaning. One is nuts and bolts, and one is ideas and execution. I need 7 horses. That's the production department. The idea that somebody says, we need 7 horses in the scene, and I'm going to write a scene about 7 horses, that's the writer.
Mm-hmm.
So they're very different. Even then, I knew the difference. So Paul King introduced me to a guy named Lenny Stern, who was running a company called Talent Associates.
He was one of the preeminent comedy producers of the era.
He was a big guy in those days.
Yep.
He was doing Get Smart and The Good Guys, The Governor and JJ, some really pretty terrific shows. I got hired, and I met Alan Burns, Chris Hayward, Dave Davis, Jim Brooks, Arnie Selden, Earl Barrett, writer after writer after writer after writer. It was a great place. I was there for a year and a half, and it certainly paid off later on. But then we were out of work. And once again, my uncle stepped in, and he introduced me to a woman named Mita Rosenberg, who was James Garner's partner on a new show. And the person that was writing that show was a guy named Frank Pearson, who became an Academy Award-winning writer. And that was a show called Nichols. And it only lasted a year.
Now, this was Frank Pearson's first foray into television, wasn't it?
Well, it was Frank Pearson's first foray into television.
Yeah.
And I went in to interview as a writer. So Pearson says to me in this meeting, well, I know you want to be a writer, but do you know anything about post-production? We're looking for an associate producer, and do you know anything about that job? Everything, I lied. And the directors that came through on that show were, well, Pearson directed it, Danny Haller, Paul Bogart, Ivan Dixon, John Badham, Bob Butler, one state-of-the-art director after another.
Was James Garner as sweet a guy as he seemed?
Several people in my life that are standouts that I feel like I've been very fortunate to work with and for. Garner and Newhart are top of the list.
That's great.
You won't find a better guy than Jimmy Garner.
So, Michael, was it at the time that you were on this show that you decided that directing might be the way you'd want to go? I
didn't know which way my career was going to turn at that point because we didn't know if Nichols was going to go forward or not. I still wanted to be a writer mainly, but I loved the directing and I loved watching the directors and I learned from them and I stayed on the set every single moment that I could and watched these guys. But the show did get canceled, and Dave Davis, who I'd met on Talent Associates, who had been my friend, who had been one of the producers on the new Mary Tyler Moore show. Mary Tyler Moore was going into its third season. The Bob Newhart show had been picked up, and for whatever God-lucky reason, the associate producer of that show decided to go take another show, and so they needed an associate producer on both the Mary Tyler Moore and Bob Newhart shows, and Dave Davis and Graham Tinker gave me that job. And that was...
And those were such huge shows for its time.
Well, I mean, it was the one of the several luckiest days in my life.
So you're in the inside now.
You are completely on the inside fast track, but you're.
Well, here's what. I mean, I still don't really. I mean, being an associate producer is like you're certainly close to the inside, but you're also just one step away from the door. I mean, you don't really have anything you can take from place to place.
Right.
But you're building relationships, and if there is any business that depends on relationships, it's this one.
No question. It was a great place to be. I mean, it was a very small company. It was Grant Tinker, and he was the best. And so for 2 years, I did that. I wrote one Mary Tyler Moore show, and I wrote 3 or 4 Bob Newhart shows. So
being on the inside gave you entree to the writing staff. And correct me if I'm
part of the writing. I was part of the writing staff on Newhart.
And correct me if I'm wrong. Once you're on the inside, they're much more likely to listen to the young guy who's the associate producer who thinks he wants to be a writer. And here's an outline he's got. Let's read it and give him some notes.
But by the same token, when they put that script down in front of Mary and Ed Asner and that crew, or in front of Bob and Suzanne, and they want it to be as good as possible. So
sure. But my point is, had you not been on the inside, the odds of you even getting anything read would have been remote.
Well, oddly enough, in those days we read spec scripts. And by the way, I was the guy who read them. But your point is well taken. When you're on the inside, you're on the inside. The second season of the Bob Newhart show was a very rocky season. And at the end of the second season, Bob asked me if I would be a producer of the show. So in fact, in the third season of the Bob Newhart show, the 3 of us took it over and we produced it for 3 seasons.
So with the writing as your really initial foray, what led to the directing? And because you're really known as a director now more than a writer, and your credits,
Absolutely.
Which they just dropped off, the Beaconstruct just came and dropped off all your credits. 200 plus directing credits. That's phenomenal. How did you make that transition?
Well, I'd always kind of wanted to direct. and I'd always had it in mind, and I worked with the directors. I followed around, Jay Sandrich, who was the #1 director on Mary Tyler Moore, and I followed Alan Rafkin and all these really, really good comedy directors, and I just watched them because I was on the stage all the time.
Yeah.
So Grant called me up to his office at the end, midway through the 3rd season.
This is Grant Tinker, head of the company, husband of Mary Tyler Moore.
So he calls me up to the office. He was a very casual guy. I mean, for a Dartmouth-educated, there was nobody cooler than Grant Tinker.
He was Ralph Lauren before Ralph Lauren.
He really was. That's a very good way to put it. So he calls me up to the office, and he said, "Hey, Michael, you're not the best writer in the company."
Did he really say that?
Absolutely.
I love it.
And I said, I know, Grant. I said, but I'm trying my best here. He said, I know you are, and you've written some pretty good scripts. I got to tell you. He was always very honest.
Uh-huh.
He said, you've written some pretty good scripts, but you know what? He said, I bet you'd be a hell of a director. And I said, well, I've always, thought about it, but, I'm pretty busy, and I don't know. He said, well, I think you ought to direct a show here at the end of the 3rd season. And he, of course, knew that we had just had a director fall out. He said, I think you ought to take that spot.
Were you scared when he said that? I mean, or were you ready?
I wasn't really frightened. I kind of didn't know where he was going.
Uh-huh.
And I was kind of just dumbstruck by it because, at some point I know I had planned to come in and beg for
what a great story.
And he said, you ought to take that spot. And I said, well, I would love to. I said, I should go talk to Bob and Suzanne. He said, no, I talked to Bob and Suzanne. They think it's a great idea. I said, okay. I said, I guess.
So again, those relationships, and Grant Tinker obviously had quite the eye for talent.
He was, again, under the category of great executives. I've worked with 3 extraordinary executives. 4 really, but Grant, Freddie Silverman, and Brandon Tartikoff were extraordinary. Don Omar was a very, very smart guy and a very good executive, and boy, was he smart.
So you get your first directing credit on Newhart, working with Suzanne Plachette and Bob Newhart, right?
Right.
What happens then? How do you take that kernel and turn it into a lasting career? Well, in
the last 3 years of the Newhart show, I probably directed 15 or 20 shows, something like that.
Wow. So let's back up a little bit. At the point of directing your first episode, did you have an agent?
I had an agent that he represented me as a young writer, and he was known for helping young writers.
Mm-hmm.
And because I landed the Mary Tyler Moore show, he didn't have much to do, but for about 2 years he was my agent. So now, between the 2nd and 3rd season of the Newhart show, when I was going to be made producer, he had to make a deal for me and to produce the Bob Newhart show. And so I'm waiting, and the deal is when he's talking to me about, they're not coming to the party. And I said, look, let me make this clear. I do this job for nothing, okay? So just please make the deal. It drags on, weeks drag on. Finally, I call him one day, and I said, I want the deal done by this afternoon. It's getting embarrassing. So he calls me back after lunch, and he says, okay, we're walking.
Oh.
Perfect.
And I said, what are you talking about? We're walking. He said, well, they're not coming up to the party, and you should walk. And I called him by his first name, and I said, you're fired. And I hung up. And I walked over to Grant Tinker's office, and I said to his secretary, I said, please, I want to see Grant. And he said, Michael, come on in, everything. And I said, Grant, I don't know what's been going on with this deal, but I just fired my agent. I said, I don't care. I'll do this job for nothing. Whatever you want, whatever you think is fine, will be fine with me. I apologize. He said, calm down. He said, everything's fine. No big deal. He said, we'll make you a good deal. We'll give you a good deal. It'll be okay. Forget it. And he said, and it's a good thing you fired that agent because he's a schmuck. So that was that.
Well, I have to tell you, on this end, that sounds like such a funny story, but I'm sure at the time
it's stressful.
Yeah.
Sure.
Now I'm back at work. Everything's fine. I get my first paycheck. I look at it, and I'm stunned. This is what I'm getting paid for 2 weeks' work, and it was more money than I'd ever seen in my life. And I went in the next day, and I went up to Tinker's office. I went to Grant's office, and I said, Grant, I just want to say thank you. I said, that's unbelievable. I don't know what to say. I can't believe you're giving me that much money for 2 weeks' work. He said, Michael, that's not for 2 weeks' work. That's for every week. And
wow.
That's what it was like working for the Mary Tyler Moore Company.
Nice.
You were valued and rewarded, and I did. And the last year of the Bob Newhart Show, I directed a lot of shows. I directed Tony Mandel. I directed Betty White. I wrote his new main title. I directed a lot of shows for them, and while producing Newhart.
So let me ask you this: so up until now, you're directing and writing and producing shows that are really 3-camera productions.
Correct.
On the stage with an audience, ensemble cast. They pretty much know what they're doing every week in terms of their characters.
Correct.
Tell me about the transition to shooting 1-camera shows and how you made that.
Well, the last Newhart finally went away after 6 amazing seasons. The Bob Newhart Show ended, and Mary Tyler Moore had ended the season before. MTM had kind of gotten into they were going to do Lou Grant, which was a spin-off of the Mary Tyler Moore Show. I was kind of an overall deal there. So the first hour of television I did was Lou Grant. Tell us
the difference as a director when you walk onto a 1-camera set as opposed to the 3-camera shows.
Well, in a multi-camera show, you rehearse the whole show and shoot it as a unit in front of an audience. It's a 5 or 6 day or 4 day process, depending. You rehearse, you block it for the cameras, then you put it up in front of an audience.
It's like shooting a play.
Like shooting a play.
Uh-huh.
A single camera show, you shoot it a scene at a time.
So these are like shooting real movies. It's the same process.
Real movies, exactly.
Right.
Do you have a preference?
Yeah, I'd rather do the hour show. Keep in mind that the Lou Grant, I did 2 Lou Grants and a White Shadow while I was at MTM, and keep in mind that those shows were done in days before monitors. There were no monitors. There were no writers on this. There was no cell phones. There was no email. There was nothing like that. You really went off with the unit and you shot your show.
So let me ask you this, because I don't want to take up the rest of your day, but I do want to get to a couple of things. You continue to work. You've been directing now for, gosh, I hate to say the word, 30 years.
40.
Okay, 40 years. You're only 45 years old. How's that possible?
Yeah. Well.
That's because you went to college.
And without going through and without going through the incredible list of credits you have, many of which are very hot and very current. The Good Wife, NCIS, Rizzoli and Isles, things like that. Tell me if you could only shoot one more episode of one more series. If the Directors Guild came down and said, you know what, you've done too much already, we're cutting you off, you have one more episode, pick the show you want from any time throughout your career, what one series episode would you want to shoot again?
Every show, people are always saying, what's your favorite show?
And your favorite actor, of course, yeah.
Yeah, and my answer to that is my next one. The next show I do is going to be my favorite show.
Oh, I like that.
The whole thing about episodic television, not only did I grow up with it and have this giant affection for it and this crazy historical knowledge of it, but it suits me in a way that is very specific to me, and that is a person who is capable of concentrating really, really pointedly for a short time.
You've taken ADD to a new height, right?
It's just, I'm good for 3.5, 4 weeks, man. 3.5, 4 weeks is just perfect.
Right.
I can really concentrate, and then, I did a ton of movies of the week, and they were probably 3 months, 4 months, and a couple of them held my interest. They really did. One that I wrote and directed about my youth in San Antonio was really a lot of fun, and one that I did with Mikey Chiklis, which was really a lot of fun. But for the most part, they were okay scripts, and we made okay movies. But the television series, when you're working with the Bob Newharts and the Gary Coles and the Juliana Margulies and Scott Bakula and Dylan McDermott and the practice crew, when you're working with that caliber of an actor, every show is golden. I mean, yeah, I've done some shows that I thought were, gulag episodes. Burn Notice, working with that actor was terrible. He's a gigantic jerk.
Now, Michael,
undirectable. But there are very few and far between.
If I were to talk to most of the actors you worked with, are you an actor's director? What style do you have in terms of directing?
I don't think you come back to shows like The Good Wife and The Practice and some of the shows that I've done, many, many episodes of. I'm in my 7th year with The Good Wife. I don't think you come back to The Good Wife without being an actor's director.
Can you explain to our audience what that exactly means?
It means that you can connect with an actor and have a dialogue with them about a scene or a line or a story arc, and you can do it in their language, and you can help them get to a better performance level because you can help them understand what that character is supposed to deliver in that scene. If you read David Mamet's memo on writing television, which is really valuable, and I suggest everybody read it, he explains the arc of a story and the arc of a scene. And actors are it's tough. They come to a show, they're doing the scenes out of sequence. They're doing, they just finished one, they're doing another one. Where am I? What am I doing in this? And they need that focus. They need to be able to be centered and given a through line to the arc of the narrative.
Are the young, new, upcoming actors, are they any different than 20 years ago?
They are less trained. And not because they're young, but because there's so much work going on. You get a lot of actors who don't have, not only who don't have any real acting background or any formal acting training, but they have no on-set experience. So they really don't know what a mark is, and they don't know what the camera is, and they don't know. And if they come from the independent film world, they're very bad at matching performance.
Right.
So actors are they're a challenging group because they're very, very different, and it would be like walking onto a stage with a group of people in a scene, none of whom speak the same language. This guy speaks English, this guy speaks Spanish, that guy speaks this, that guy speaks...
That sounds tough.
Like herding cats, for sure.
Well, it is a little bit like herding cats, but the most important thing is, like you have Juliana Margulies, you have Christine Baranski, you have Alan Cummings. You're not going to find 3 better actors on the planet. 3 actors who have more schooling, more talent, more craft. They just are so schooled and prepared, and if you compare it to a golfer, they've got every shot in the bag. They can hit shots with all 14 clubs. Still, they're very different to communicate with.
So this sounds like it requires not only a lot of talent but immense patience. Would you call yourself a patient person on the set?
Well, I think Leslie would argue with that, but I don't think the actors would.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So on the set, you
put your director's hat on, and you...
Directing television is the world of what is. And by that I mean you can't design a perfect environment. You have to be able to deal with the environment you're presented with.
Hey, before we wrap up, I do want to discuss one aspect of your career for which you are not particularly well known, and that is network executive. How did that come about, and what was that like for you? I mean, how many guys go from associate producer to writer to director to network executive, back to producer, executive producer, and ultimately directing?
And so where in your career did this happen?
Well, it happened twice. Once when I left the Mary Tyler Moore Company because Freddie Silverman and Brandon Tartikoff convinced me to come to NBC, and by and large that was a very interesting time. I'm a lousy executive because I don't meddle. If I hire somebody to do a job, I'm expecting them to do a job. Vice versa, if somebody hires me to do the job, I expect to do the job. Somebody says, go out and buy a blue car. I'm going to go out and buy a blue car. Fred really was he liked to be a participant as opposed to just simply a buyer. And in some cases it worked great. And in some cases, it didn't work so well at all because the producers and the writers and the directors felt meddled with. But that was Fred's deal. My deal was, and I told them both. I said, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to get involved. We made 2 deals at NBC in which it was by contract that the network had no creative input. One was a show with Larry Gelbart called United States, which didn't work, and one was a show with Stephen Bochco and Bob Butler called Hill Street Blues, which was probably
which worked very well, right?
Probably one of the most important shows on television.
Right. It really it changed the way shows were shot.
Right. And so Fred said to me, he says, those deals don't work. I said, Freddie, here's what. We made 2 of them. We batted 500. When was the last pilot season you batted 500?
Right.
When was the last pilot season you made 10 pilots and 5 of them were great? Then when Omar wanted me to be president of NBC, I did it for 2 reasons. One, because I was tired of the road. The shows in those days were really on the road, and my boys were teenagers, and I wanted to stay home. It didn't work out because halfway through the deal, GE decided it didn't want to do what they had said they wanted to do at the beginning, which was to actually start a production company. They decided they did not want to invest that kind of money for limited return. It wasn't in the GE mold. When those fortunes changed, I was still not a good executive because I still let the people do what they were supposed to do. But when those fortunes changed, I was fortunate enough to have bought a pilot script from my old partner Belisario called Jag. He made Jag. It got on the air. I left NBCP to produce that with Don. It wasn't the best experience anybody ever had, but at the end of the day, it was okay. I don't know why I had to do it twice to find out I'm a shitty executive. But,
now, one of the names you mentioned very quickly in passing earlier in this conversation is someone who's been mentioned on our podcast many, many times. And your tenure at NBC as an executive brought you into close contact with Brandon Tartikoff.
Right.
Tell me what that was like working with him.
Well, he was an extraordinary fellow. I mean, he was amazingly smart. He had great talent, and he had the ability to communicate with creative people on a level that it's like talking to actors. He had that ability to talk to creative people and give them ideas and pitch them ideas and do it in a way where they didn't feel like it was being dictated to.
No, I must say, I've worked with a lot of studio execs, and Brandon, as young as he was, every time he and I ever had a conversation, it turned into a major success for everybody. He was, in fact, a true collaborator, even though he never sat down at the keyboard and gave me scenes. He certainly inspired a number of pilots, and I'm not the only one.
He was a great guy. He was great. He was phenomenal.
Yeah, and
died way too young.
A real industry loss, absolutely. So listen, as we wrap up, let me ask you one of our final questions, and that is,
sure.
You're kind of an emeritus character at this point. You're still very active, and that's why it's been so hard to get you on the podcast. You're always traveling. You're in New York or New Orleans shooting.
Jet setter.
A real jet setter. Yeah, right.
Yeah, right.
No, usually he's neck deep in a blizzard and with a camera. But
exactly right.
If somebody comes to you today and they are 19 or 20 years old and they're at the University of Texas and they're not destined for medical school, but they want to get into the entertainment business, what advice do you give them?
Number one, don't go to film school. If you want to take some film classes, do it as a minor or elective. Study English, study sociology, study history, and to get the information you need to be a good writer or director. If you want to be a writer, you obviously need to study narrative and structure. If you want to be a director, you have to start, you just have to create a reference system that goes deeper than Napoleon Dynamite. I mean, you have to really go back and watch the evolution of film and television directing to understand what it takes, and then you have to get out here and get some kind of a job that will give you access to the stages, because that will really that'll give you the information, the operational information that you need. But the most important thing that you need is the ability to tell a story, and you need to be able to tell that story not only from a straight line literary point of view, but you need to be able to tell it visually.
Well, I must say, you have certainly embodied that in this conversation. You have told a fantastic story the story of Michael Zinberg. I can't.
I'm glad everybody's still awake.
Hey, listen, I can't tell you how much we appreciate this. Tell us what you're working on now, what your next projects are. I just read a terrific pilot script of yours.
Well, I'd like to get that done. We'll see. I've got a season that's shows that I love. I'm doing The Good Wife. I'm doing NCIS New Orleans. I'm doing Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., a new show called Rosewood.
Wow, that's busy.
And you've written a novel.
I wrote a book, yeah. I'm doing a bunch of stuff. I'm active in the Directors Guild and still trying to get on the PGA Golf Tour, but, I think that's
right, you're a golfer. I have a really quick question for you still.
Sure.
When you look at there's an abundance of television shows compared to 20 or 30 years ago. It's pretty overwhelming. Right. When you watch a television show, whether it's often or infrequent, are you directing those shows yourself when you see them? Do you give a critique in your mind about this is not a great show, this was not directed? Are you always in the director or a writer's mode, or can you enjoy a motion picture or a television show without being the director?
She's talking about me because I can't watch a movie without cutting it to pieces.
I think that's actually a great question. It's an interesting barometer, because if I'm entertained, I don't pay any attention to anything.
Interesting.
Because I make it a practice not to criticize. I'll talk about the writing, but I very rarely will talk about another director's work unless I think it's fucking great and I can really point that out. But I'm not on the stage with that director, so I don't know what that director went through to get whatever she got on the screen. But if I'm entertained, then I don't pay any attention to it at all. If I'm starting to watch the directing and I'm starting to watch, the camera angles and performance and things like that, then it's not working and the movie's not working. So I try not to do it, and in those circumstances when I'm able not to do it, I'm really happy, because that means I'm entertained. That means I'm taking the ride.
Well, you're an inspiration to your peers and all those who follow, and I just can't tell you how much we appreciate your time.
It's been a gas.
Okay,
Thank
man.
you, Michael.
Thanks so much. All right,
Bye-bye.
take care.
Bye-bye.
You know what really impressed me the most? That I really didn't have a grasp of it. He really did almost everything except acting in the business.
That's
he
right.
tried everything. He was good at everything, but he soon came to realize what he was best at, which is really impressive, because a lot of people in show business end up somewhere where they don't want to end up.
I would use the word fully evolved.
Yes, it's quite impressive.
Michael has come a long way since our days as DJs at the University of Texas on our little stupid comedy show.
The actors must love being directed by him.
Well, Michael's very thoughtful, and he can be very powerful when he needs to be as well. No, he's a real leader on the set, that's for sure.
And he can read every actor for what they're like.
Yep. Anyway, that was a great conversation. I'm so glad he did that. Before we go, I want to remind everybody, go to our website at wherehollywoodhides.com. Take a look at our book, Where Hollywood Hides, Celebrities in Paradise. And you'll see it's a fabulous value. It's a hardcover, full-color edition, packed with celebrities from the Santa Barbara area. You'll get great professional biographies, full-color pictures. Makes the ultimate gift. Also, while you're on the website, be sure to check out all the Amazon links. Anything you want to buy, and let's face it, everybody needs a new coffee maker once in a while. Buy it through our website at wherehollywoodhides.com on the Amazon link.
And there is a fabulous movie that is coming out, at least the trailer was great, called Ricky and the Flash. Have you heard of that yet?
No.
That's with Meryl Streep. It's a story about a mother who was an old rock and roll singer who stayed in the business. And guess who is guest starring with her? Somebody that you know very well. Rick Springfield.
Oh, wow.
Plays one of the guys in her band.
Well, good for Rick. That's fantastic. He has been a fabulous actor ever since I've known him.
And he is like the Energized Bunny.
He keeps going, doesn't he?
He keeps reinventing himself.
Yeah.
Anyway,
one of the nicest guys I've ever met.
The film looks fabulous. Please take me to see it. It's a Streep movie.
Can't wait.
Please.
So happy for Rick. That's a wonderful opportunity.
He looks really great.
Yeah. So listen, before we leave today, I want to remind everybody to go to our website at wherehollywoodhides.com and check out our new hardcover book, Where Hollywood Hides,
Celebrities in Paradise.
Right. It's a great collector's item and makes a wonderful gift.
And that book is soon going to come out in softcover as well. We'll let you know when that happens.
Another of our great sponsors you really should check out is 1-800-Flowers.com. Go to our...
Oh, yes, flowers.com. That's
right.
a great idea.
1-800-Flowers.com has a banner on our website, and they are the preeminent floral delivery, really nationwide. Great value, great service. Today's been a great conversation with Michael Zinberg. Be sure to go to our website at wherehollywoodhides.com. You'll see show notes there. You'll get a little bit more of Mike. You'll see some pictures of him. Until next time, this is Bob McCullough.
And this is Suzanne Herrera-McCullough. See you at the movies. And today's music is provided by Chance McCullough. You can find more of his original soundtracks at chancemccullough.com.
From Chilicombes and Paducas with their bazookas to get their names up in lights.
All armed with photos from local rotos, with their hair in ribbons and legs in tights. Hooray for Hollywood! You have no way of knowing who'll make good.
Maybe you'll be another Papa Dion, your name in neon. If you get lucky, you could. Yes, buddy, you'll arrive if you can top his five. Hooray for Hollywood!
Hooray for Hollywood! Hollywood and Woolly Hollywood! They hire cowboys and then hang their chaps up and doll their maps up and give them all that they lack. Now ain't it funny? They pay a money. Shows what you can do if your horse can act. Act like ape men and then convince the nation. They make him run and yell, and people think